Welcome to the lecture series in computer science. We are seeing a series of lectures in the subject Agile methodologies. We will be seeing a topic on the requirements management and requirements elicitation and the challenges in requirement gathering. Now, the contents of the session are: we will be saying about how to manage the requirements, and we will be seeing the impact of process in requirement engineering, which is in short called as RE, and issues in requirements elicitation. We will be seeing about the requirements elicitation techniques. As well, we will be seeing the challenges in the requirements engineering, and we will be seeing about variance, what a variance is, how do you measure the variance, and what are the different types of variances are available, and what is the implication of this variance in the with respect to the agile software development. So, we will be concluding the session by seeing the variance and by seeing the measures of variance. Now, as a first topic of this session, we will be seeing about the requirement management. What is the requirement management? How do you need to review the requirements collaboratively? My dear viewers, in the earlier lectures we have already seen that when we are going to work with the agile software development, it is a collaborative approach. We saw many different methodologies. We saw the methodologies such as extreme programming, frameworks such as Scrum, methodologies such as Crystal, Agile adaptive software development, and then we saw about the lean methodology, so on and so forth. So, in almost all the methodologies, in terms of working with agile software development, it is exclusively based on working in a stiff team, and the person whoever is working in an agile team, he should be so versatile, he should be so swift in action, and he should be in a position to collaborate with his team members, he should be in a position to collaborate with the counter peers. So this starts from the very beginning of the requirement gathering itself, and the very beginning of in managing the requirements itself. So, even when people are going to review the requirements, it has to be done collaboratively. So, now let us see. Collaboration paves the way for better knowledge transfer and interactive data exchange. People working in collaboration with each other make a greater contribution to a common goal, rather than an individual trying to address the same goal personally. Then, the second way to manage requirements is to visualize the agile project requirements. My dear viewers, in a subject called software engineering, you would have learnt about the traditional life cycle model. Here in this subject, it is exclusively on the agile life cycle model. So, in a traditional life cycle model, you might be knowing the requirements will be crystal clear, you know how to get the requirements. But here, the way of getting the requirements is pretty different when you compare it to the traditional life cycle model. So, here such requirements has to be visualized. So, visualization makes it much easier and faster for people to understand information and put it in an appropriate context. Visuals rather than text accelerate an individual's perception of the situation and help generate decisions faster and in the right context. Visualization needs to be combined with text and audio. As well, you can even have certain animated videos too. And then the third way of managing the requirements is by analyzing the current state and understanding the future gaps. There is a common mistake in agile processes as well in agile projects, that is too much attention is paid to how the development and gaps in the future are ignored or left unhandled. The teams spend too much time and effort on documenting and analyzing the current state of the project. So, you are supposed to analyze, and then the next way of managing the requirements is to manage the requirements with the change in requests. My dear viewers, as you already know, when people will be going to this agile software development, when there is a change in requirement, when there is a requirement creep, when the requirements are not clearly known in advance, so in that scenario people go in for this agile software development. So here, in order to manage such requirements that has a change request, it is highly adaptive to user requirements and makes the software development environment match changes. Traditional project management appears to be less flexible but ensures greater predictability and steadiness of the development process from the very beginning of the project. Then the next way of managing the requirements is to keep the requirement documentation organized. My dear viewers, in our earlier lectures we would have seen that as far as the agile documentation is concerned, pretty less documentation will suffice. Yes, that is true, but we do documentation, we do the needed documentation. Needed documentation is the work that whatever has been carried out, only for that work that has been carried out we write the documentation. So, and whatever documentation that we write, it has to be in an organized form. So many organizations that run application development and agile projects often keep this requirements documentation unorganized. So the essence of what requirement state is missed. So when you are going to do the documentation part, it should be in an organized manner. So let us see about the unorganized and the organized records maintained in the organizations, because many people, only in the recent days in India, people migrate from the traditional life cycle, traditional software project development to this agile software project development. So when they are migrating from one traditional to the agile, they do not know how to maintain the documentation. They do not know, they might be pretty new in their working. So let us see what an unorganized record is, what an organized record is. As far as an unorganized record is concerned, unorganized or missed information on business and solution requirements sets the project for missed value and opportunity to the stakeholders. Keeping and organizing records on the true requirements will shorten the project timeline and prevent many troubles in the agile design process. Now let us see the impact of the agile processes in requirements engineering. At the start of this session, I said the requirements engineering in short is called as RE. So let us see the impact of agile processes in RE. The fact that process of requirement engineering requires a lot of time, it is the best way to get best out of the likelihood for the efficient product to meet the conditions and requirements. Requirement engineering performs a key part in development of software. Requirement engineering, in short, which is called as an RE again, is a main area in software production and engineering. Now let us see what requirement elicitation is. My dear viewers, you might be knowing about the requirement gathering. Now you are going to elicit the requirements. What is that eliciting? Understanding the requirements. If you want to understand the requirements, what do? Say for example, you are a developer. Let us consider you are a developer and you have a client in front of you, and the client wants a supermarket application software, a software for his supermarket firm. So, and let us consider you are said to be a fresher. You do not have prior experience working in agile projects, prior experience working in developing many different software projects, as well creating a software product. So in that scenario, if the customer is going to say, my dear developer, I want to develop I need a software wherein I need to bill, the billing counter should have the customer information and proper billing should be given to the customer. That is what if the client is going to say to you. What do you do then? You will be asking him n number of queries, how it should be done. Supposing starting from the initial screen, where do you want to have a login page? In the login page, what sort of logo you need to have, how you need to have your password, and in the screen, in the customer screen or in the vendor screen, what sort of menus are required. Supposing if he is going to give, the client is going to say, I need menu like file, edit, view, exit. You will become more curious and you will be asking him, inside the file menu, what is the sub menu I need to have? He will say, you give it as new, open, close. Then you will be asking him whether you need to have save, save as, print, print preview, so on and so forth, because you would have had an experience in working in the Microsoft Word, or you would have had an experience in working in other softwares. So you will be posing him as many queries as possible. Why do you pose him as many queries as possible? That is where you try to understand the requirements. That is where the elicitation part comes in. That is where the requirement elicitation happens. So the requirement elicitation is the process of extracting the information from users, customers and group of people. It is non-trivial as can never find the requirement of the system from the user and customer by just asking them what the system actually needs, because the customer by himself or herself, he does not know what they really need. That is the specialty of the Agile software development. That is the reason we go in for this Agile software development, because wherein the requirements are not clearly known even to the customer. The requirements are not, there is a requirement creep. So the change in request takes place quite often. So that is the reason we move in over here. So we try to understand as much as possible from the client end. That is where the requirement elicitation role plays in. Then next is we will be seeing the possible way to get the requirements or making questionnaires, brainstorming sessions, workshopping and interviewing. The client may not be knowing all the features whatever he requests, but what will you do? The example which I gave us, you are a developer, you are a fresher, you have opened a company only at that particular instance of time. He is said to be your first client, you do not want to miss him. So what will you do? You roam in your locality to the nearby supermarkets. You will be checking how that particular supermarket software works in. You will be checking all the websites of the similar softwares that has been developed. So you will be coming out with more and more points, so that you can have a fruitful discussion with the client and you can do the same in your software product. For that reason, if you are going to ask the competitive supermarket store and ask to have a look at their software, will that company, will they allow? If they are going to allow, you will be looking in, or else it is always a better practice to create a questionnaire, to make a survey, to give it to the employee of the shop as well, to give it to the customers, and you can as well get the copy of the bill and you can have a look at. That is where the questionnaire and the brainstorming session goes in out. You can attend similar workshops and you can interview the people whoever is coming out of the supermarket, and you can ask them how their bill looks like and what sort of messages that they receive in their mobile phones, because nowadays we get as many messages as possible stating that this particular product has been given as an offer of 50%, this particular product has been given as an offer of 30%. Such discounts we will be coming to know only through our mobile phones. So you can get all those details through an informal interviewing. Then involving elicitation process and the different elicitation techniques, fulfilling the requirements and constraints of the system. Requirement elicitation can be broken down into the activities of fact finding, information gathering and integration. You need to find out the facts, you need to gather the information, and you need to collaborate, you need to integrate all the information that you have taken, and then you need to meet the client, you need to again have a discussion so that you get a better understanding of the product that you are going to create. Now let us see the process involved in the requirement elicitation. Actual requirements are gathered from different sources: list of incomplete findings, wish list of well-defined requirements, bringing together the entire collected list, maintaining the regular checking of the goal and wish list, also check the non-functional requirements. Now let us see the issues in requirement elicitation. Not having good skills to collect the information and cannot understand the group problem. See, the client would have said something and you would have understood in a different manner, and when you are going into the supermarket, the scenario may be different. The client may be a Chinese client, the client may be a Nigerian client, wherein he may not be comfortable in speaking, in communicating in English. He will be speaking in a language called Swahili, wherein you do not know the language called Swahili, you know only English, and he does not know English. So in that scenario, when he is going to give his requirements, there is a possibility that you might not be understanding the full requirements, the requirements to the fullest extent whatever the client desires. So in that scenario, you might end up in understanding the group's problem. You might end up in understanding the team's problem, because people whoever is going in to gather the requirements, because anyway you are working collaboratively. And the other issue in requirement elicitation is not having a well defined solution for the actual problem. Next is not focusing on the requirements of the system, but more on the design, which is not of great use on this stage. Because first of all, you need to have a clarity in the requirements. The more and more clarity that you have in requirements, the more better will be your design. Without getting the requirements, if you start designing with the knowledge that you have in your mind, and that might end up in a problem, because the client may not be accepting for the design that you have developed. So the requirements should be changeable according to time. And the other part is not having the lack of analyst knowledge with the problem. See, we might be interested in developing a software, but we do not know how to gather the requirements. We do not know how to analyze the requirements. Then it will again end up in problem. Lack of user's knowledge also create a problem in elicitation. Problems with understanding the language between the user and the analyst. That is the reason we said in our previous sessions that the knowledge or the language that a Scrum Master speaks with the customer is called the business language. The language that the Scrum Master speaks with the team is called the technical language. So there might be a problem in understanding the language between the user and the analyst. Ignoring or omitting the actual problem. The boundary of the problem should be well defined. Then only you can go into the next step of the designing. Now let us define the problem from the requirements gathered. Define the boundary of the problem. Influence of environmental factors and constraints. Problems of understanding. Information should be collected from different level of abstraction. Requirements will eventually change. That is the speciality of working in Agile software development. Now let us see some of the elicitation techniques. Elicitation techniques are invented to aid solving some problems in the elicitation process. Each technique usually has solution only for one area of problem in requirement elicitation. Techniques can be divided to categories which represent the phases of elicitation process. Now let us see some of the requirement engineering challenges. Let us classify the requirement engineering challenges into three groups. One is called the features, second is the details, third is the challenges. As far as the first feature is concerned, you have the direct communication. The details are the communication between the client and the team members. Minimum documentation in Agile is required. The challenges how to track changes in requirements is a very big challenge. Then the second feature is large interaction of clients. As far as the details, client interaction is required for large amount of feedback. The challenge is large workload. Then as a third feature, the change in requirements, as I said, handling the changes, for which you need to work again and again. Say for example, if you are going to learn something, at the first instance of time, few people may get almost all the points, but it is not the case with everyone. So if you are going to write an examination, you need to read again and again the same concept. Then only you will be in a position to understand pretty well. You will be in a position to present your answer pretty well in the examination. Similarly, if there is a change, you need to work again and again. Then next is the negligence of the non-functional requirements. NFR denotes non-functional requirements. The user stories just store functional requirements. So overrun and high cost projects. Then you have the innovation in requirements engineering, creativity in requirement engineering, which means there will be a creativity issue in the agility and in the release. Then next is about the missing requirements. How do you discover the missing requirements? A large number of iterations for missing requirements have to be handled. Then conflicting requirements. How do you get the conflict and how do you manage the ambiguity in gathering the requirements? It can be handled through large number of iterations. Then now let us see how to implement the current agile practices using iterative development. What is an iterative development? Frequent iterations generate increments of work that can be inspected to determine the state of the project and serve as a basis for adaptation. Increments of work composed of working system functionality rather than artifacts. These increments create a one-to-one relationship between progress and product delivery and provide a mechanism for user feedback to real product rather than arcane internal artifacts. Collaboration. The customers and engineers from the team or the developers that work together. What is a daily meeting? Provide a daily picture of the internal status of the project. Adaptation. The teams of developers self-organize daily based on the daily meetings, and the developers and customers self-organize at the end of every increment to guide the project to create the greatest value. Emergence. The architecture, team structure and requirements emerge during the course of the project rather than being determined at its outset. Now let us go into the next concept of variance. What is a variance? Variance is a measure of how data points differ from the mean. Let us consider two examples, two data sets. First data set has a value such as 3, 5, 7, 10, 10. Second data set has a value such as 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 5 sevens. So what is the mean and median of the above data set? These two are two different data sets. First data set is of values as data as 3, 5, 7, 10, 10. Second data set has data as 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. So let us take the mean of the first data set. How do you take the mean of the first data set? Add all divided by the total number of data available. So 3 plus 5 is 8, 8 plus 1 15, 15 plus 10 25, 25 plus 10 35. So 35 divided by 5 data, you get it as 7. Similarly, you have 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. So 35 divided by 5, you again get it as 7. So now what is the median? Median denotes the central value, middle value. So even that is also 7 and 7. But the wonder is here you have two different data sets. So how it is all one and the same? We know that two data sets are not identical. The variance shows how they are different. To find a way to represent these two data sets numerically, the variance and standard deviation measure of variability is based on deviation of individual observation about the central value. For this purpose, the mean usually serves as the center. Now, as far as the measures of variability is concerned, you have the population variance, sample variance. As far as standard deviation is concerned, you have the population standard deviation, sample standard deviation. As far as the coefficient of variation is concerned, you have sample coefficient variation, population coefficient variation. Now, the measure of variability and the population variance is calculated with a formula called as sigma square equal to summation of I equal to 1 to n, where from xi minus mu whole divided by n, where sigma square stands for population variance, mu is the population mean, n is the total number of values in the population, xi is the value of the ith observation, and summation sigma denotes the represents of summation. So, the population variance, in practice population variance cannot be computed directly because the entire population is not ordinarily observed, and analogous measure of variability may be determined with sample data. This is referred to as sample variance. Now, let us see the measures of association. Scatter diagram plot provides a graphical description of positive, negative and linear and non-linear relationship are obtained by covariance, which is called as population covariance or sample covariance. Coefficient of correlation, which is again classified into population coefficient of correlation and sample coefficient of correlation. The relative standing box plot interpretation. If the median is near the center of the box, the distribution is approximately symmetric. If the median falls to the left of the center of the box, the distribution is positively skewed. If the median falls to the right of the center of the box, the distribution is negatively skewed. If the lines are about the same length, the distribution is approximately symmetric. If the line segment of the right of the box is larger than one on the left, the distribution is positively skewed. If the line segment to the left of the box is larger than one to the right, the distribution is positively skewed. Now, let us summarize this session. We have seen about how to manage requirements. We saw about the impact of process in requirement engineering. We saw about the issues in requirement elicitation. We saw about the requirement elicitation techniques. We saw about the challenges in requirement engineering. We saw about what a variance is. I gave you an example with respect to two different data sets, and we saw about the measures of variance. Thank you.